My name is Wendy. I am 34 years old, and 3 weeks after I buried my husband, my sister stood up at a birthday party and tried to take half of my home. The room smelled like frosting and candle wax. My nephew Mason, just 1 year old, was sitting in his high chair hitting it with a spoon, and my sister Cassandra, dressed nicely and wearing a wide smile, tapped a fork against her glass and told the whole family that my dead husband was her baby's father. I set my plate down on the counter and said, "Oh, I see." That was all. No screaming, no crying, no dramatic collapse. Just those 3 quiet words. And then I picked up my purse and walked out into the cold air. What happened next took exactly 9 days to finish. That I have worked as an emergency room nurse for 11 years. When everything is falling apart and people are scared, they look for the calmest person in the room. For some reason, that person has always been me. So even at my own husband's funeral, I was the one saying hello to cousins, thanking neighbors, and refilling the coffee pot in the church basement while my chest felt like someone was squeezing into a fist. Daniel was only 41. He had a heart attack on a Tuesday morning, right between his second cup of coffee and his first work call of the day. There was no warning, no long goodbye, just a phone ringing inside my locker at the hospital while I was finishing a night shift, and my head nurse saying my name in that voice I had only ever heard or used with patients who were losing someone they loved. We had spent 6 years making our house a home. It was a broken-down place built in the 1920s on Lenin Street, and everyone told us to tear it down and start over. We didn't listen. We spent 6 years stripping old wallpaper, sanding the wooden floors, and having small arguments about paint colors. We worked so hard that we eventually paid it off completely. A real estate agent told me it was worth $800,000. He thought that number would comfort me. It didn't. To me, the house was the smell of wood dust and the sound of Daniel laughing at himself when he measured something wrong. After the funeral, I went back to work after 2 days. People thought that was strange. But the emergency room doesn't stop because your husband is gone. And for a few minutes at a time, my hands knew exactly what to do, and I didn't have to think about my grief. At home, though, everything was different. The house was too quiet and too full of him at the same time. His reading glasses on the kitchen windowsill, his handwriting on the calendar. Daniel was an accountant, careful and methodical about everything. He labeled things, kept every receipt, organized his folders inside other folders. He used to tell me that one day I would thank him for it. I would joke that I would thank him by never looking at any of his paperwork. That on the 3rd night after the funeral, I finally sat down at the kitchen table with a glass of juice I never drank. I reached into my bag and pulled out the white envelope that Daniel's lawyer had pressed into my hand during the wake. The front said Greg Howard, attorney at law, and below that, a single line in Daniel's neat handwriting. I turned the envelope over and over in my hands. Then I put back down. I wasn't ready to hear his voice through his writing yet. I told myself I would open it when I felt stronger. I had no idea that in 3 weeks, I would need whatever was inside it more than I had ever needed anything, and why Mother called on a Sunday afternoon, her voice sweeter than usual. My mother, Margaret, is not naturally sweet unless she has a reason to be. She told me Mason was turning 1. And that Cassandra would be heartbroken if I didn't come. I sat on the bottom step of my stairs and held the phone against my ear. My sister, and I hadn't really spoken since the funeral. She had stayed in the back that day and left early. I told my mom I didn't think I was ready for a party, and she said quietly that it would mean a lot to the family. Whenever she says the family, it feels like a door closing. You don't have options after that. I knew Cassandra's year had been hard. Her marriage to a man named Travis had fallen apart badly. She had lost her apartment in November and moved back into my mother's spare bedroom with the baby and a mountain of credit card debt. Everyone in the family whispered about her problems, but nobody said anything to her face. I actually felt sorry for her. So I said yes, I would come. I heard my mother exhale like she was relieved. At the time, I thought she was just glad I was coming out of the house. Later, I realized she was relieved because their plan was already working. I bought Mason a soft toy elephant and a savings bond because that is what a good aunt does. I had no idea I was actually buying a ticket to a trap. The night before the party, I worked a 12-hour shift. My boss had offered me more time off, and I had told her I was fine. My friend Dana, the lead nurse, found me cleaning an already clean supply cart at 2 in the morning. She told me to go home and cry if I needed to. I told her crying doesn't fix anything. She said that wasn't the point. I drove home as the sun came up, showered, slept for 4 hours, put on a blue dress, and looked in the mirror until I found just enough of myself to get through a house full of relatives. The white envelope was still in my purse. It had been there for 3 weeks. M.Y. Mother's house smelled like cinnamon and cake. The kitchen was crowded with people. My Aunt Renata, cousins, neighbors, and a friend of Cassandra's from work. Everyone looked at me with that tilted head expression people give you when they feel sorry for you. I let them. Mason looked adorable in his little paper crown, and I held him for a few minutes and felt a quiet sadness for the child Daniel, and I never had. I pushed the feeling down. Cassandra kept calling Mason Daniel's little man, and I noticed that the way I noticed small details from patients, filed away without reacting. Travis was there too, which surprised me. He and Cassandra had apparently been spending time together again. He stayed close to her and kept refilling her glass. My mother kept glancing at the clock. Cassandra kept glancing at my mother. I could feel something in the air, but I couldn't name it yet that we sang Happy Birthday. I cut the cake, and then, just as everyone was eating, my mother stood up and tapped a knife against her glass. She said Cassandra had something to share, and M.Y.'s sister stood up, smoothed her dress, and looked at me with the expression of someone who has been practicing what they are about to say. She started slowly, talking about how difficult her year had been, the divorce, losing Daniel, her voice trembling slightly when she said his name. Then she said that Daniel meant more to her than any of us knew. The kitchen air changed. She looked directly at me and said that Mason was Daniel's son. She said they had been together before he got sick. She said Daniel wanted his son taken care of. Someone in the back gasped. Cassandra reached into a folder and pulled out a document with an official-looking stamp. She held it up and said it was Daniel's real will. She said it left money and property for his son, and therefore she would be taking half of the house on Leanin Street. She said it was what Daniel wanted. She looked proud. My mother looked rehearsed. Travis looked like someone who had just placed a winning bet. Every person in that kitchen turned to look at me at exactly the same time that I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how enormous the distance was between what she thought she knew and what I actually knew. There was a baby right there, though. So I didn't laugh. I kept my face still. I said, "Oh, I see." I picked up my plate, put it in the sink, washed my fork, thanked my mother for the party, kissed Mace on the head, and walked out into the cold. I sat in my car in the driveway. My hands were perfectly steady. I reached into my purse and found the white envelope. For the first time, I opened it. Inside was a small card. 2 sentences in Daniel's neat, careful handwriting. He wrote that if anyone ever tried to fight me for the house, I should not argue. He said to go see Greg, because Greg had everything I needed. That was all. No long explanation, no drama. Just 2 quiet sentences, like a hand placed on my shoulder. I read them over and over in the dark car, while the cold settled around me. He knew, before he died, before any of this happened, Daniel had known someone might come for the house. He had quietly built a wall around me, without ever telling me it was there. I drove home, put the card on the kitchen table, and made a plan. I would call Greg on Monday morning. That night, my phone filled up with messages. My mother told me I couldn't walk away from family. My Aunt Renata said I shouldn't let pride stop me from doing the right thing. The messages grew sharper as the night went on. My mother called at 9 and told me I should give Cassandra something for the baby. She said it over and over, using the child like a lever. I told her I was tired and needed to sleep. I didn't mention the card or the lawyer that on Wednesday morning I went to see Greg. His office was in an old brick building. He was a kind, careful man who said he had been wondering when I would show up. He told me Daniel said I would come when I was ready. I showed him the card. I told him about Cassandra and the document she had presented. Greg reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick folder with my name on it. He told me Daniel had set everything up a year ago, quietly, without telling me, because he didn't want me to worry unless I truly needed it. Greg showed me the real will, leaving everything to me. He showed me the deed to the house, paid off and in my name. He showed me a signed document stating we had no children. Then he showed me a smaller cream-colored envelope tucked inside the folder, with "For Wendy when needed" written on the front. He told me to wait for the right moment to open it. I took it home and put on the kitchen table next to the salt shaker. For 9 days I looked at it while Greg worked quietly in the background. He determined that the document Cassandra had presented was not real. He found the mistakes I had already noticed when she left her papers with me. The will referenced a bank account we had closed 4 years ago. It listed an address from an apartment we had moved out of 6 years ago. The signature was wrong in the way that copied signatures always are, too careful, too deliberate, and Travis had signed it as a witness. Meanwhile, Cassandra posted a sad story online about a single mother being mistreated by her own family. She didn't use my name. She didn't need to. Everyone knew. Her comments filled up with sympathy and outrage. I read every word and went back to my chores. Loud things online are no match for quiet things like deeds and real legal documents. I knew what I had why Mother asked me to come over on a Friday. She was genuinely crying that time, scared that Cassandra and Mason would have nowhere to go. I held her because I love her. But loving someone doesn't mean agreeing with their lies, and protecting a child doesn't mean surrendering your home to someone who is deceiving you. Cassandra told me Sunday dinner was my last chance to be reasonable. She said she was going to court on Monday. I decided to go to that dinner. I called Greg and asked him to come with me. He said yes that on Sunday morning. I finally opened the cream envelope. My hands were shaking for the first time since any of this began. Inside was a letter from Daniel. He told me that if I was reading it, someone was claiming he had fathered a child. He told me it wasn't true. He wrote that in the spring of 2022 he had a vasectomy, and that he had kept the lab results proving he was not able to father children. He told me not to argue. Just show them the papers. I sat at the kitchen table and laughed and cried at the same time. This careful, organized, loving man had filed away the proof I would need 2 years before the problem existed. I made 3 copies of everything and put them in a folder. That afternoon, Travis sent me a text message telling me to just sign the papers, that he had already handled the witness portion of the will. He had admitted in writing that the signature was forged. I forwarded the message to Greg. That evening, I walked into my mother's house. Cassandra was seated at the head of the table, looking certain of her victory. She began her speech again. The baby, the will, the house. Then Greg walked in behind me, and I watched her certainty shift into something else. I asked everyone to sit down. I put Daniel's real will on the table. I went through every error in the document Cassandra had produced. I pointed out the closed bank account, the wrong address, the copied signature. Greg explained that presenting a forged will to a court is a felony. I watched the people around the table slowly lean away from my sister. Then I placed the medical records in the center of the table and explained, calmly and clearly, that Daniel had undergone a vasectomy in 2022. Mason was born in 2025. The dates made it impossible. The room went silent. Cassandra screamed that I was lying, that the papers were fake. Nobody believed her. Travis was already gone. I didn't feel like I had won anything. I just felt the particular exhaustion of having been right about something you wish you were wrong about. That I told my family that if every claim stopped that night, I would not involve the police. I told Cassandra she needed to sign a document surrendering any claim to the house and write me a formal apology. And I told them that I was setting up a college fund for Mason that only I would control, because the little boy deserved something good come out of all of this, and because Daniel would have wanted that 0.6 weeks later. Everything was settled. The house is mine. The fund is open. Travis is gone and nobody speaks of him. My mother and I talk, but something between us is different now, and I think it always will be. I still go to work. I still miss Daniel every single day. But I know that he loved me with a love that was practical and quiet and thorough, the kind that files paperwork and keeps receipts and makes sure that even after he was gone, I would be protected. He was right about everything. And I have learned that being quiet is not the same as giving up. Sometimes it just means you already know something the other person doesn't.